Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Humphries. I'm so glad that you've decided to join us again. If you're a first-time listener, on this podcast, I'm joined by fellow experts on all aspects of running recruitment businesses. That ranges from suppliers to the industry to thought leaders, like my guest today, and business owners. I'm delighted to be joined today by the lovely Cathleen O'Sullivan. Cathleen, good morning and welcome. Cathleen owns Cathleen Merkel Coaching and specialises in leadership development across multiple industries, but in particular, we're talking today about small businesses. And just for clarity, Merkel is your maiden name, Kathleen,
Yes.
is that right? Okay, but
Yes.
you are now Cathleen O'Sullivan. Lovely. So a good place to start, rather than me read out your LinkedIn profile, it might be just to ask you to tell us your story as a leader and what your personal biggest learnings have been from that development.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I know you would usually have experts in the recruitment area here and talk about super interesting stories. I'm really delighted to speak about leadership in particular because it's such a passion topic. And in all honesty, Alison, every time I hear thought leader associated with my name, I'm like, ooh, that still feels uncomfortable, right? There's this inner gremlin that comes out right away and says, you thought leader. But I do have beliefs. I have done research and I've worked for many, many years with leaders as well. And yes, according to my job titles, I used to be a leader as well in organizations. But I've never set out to be a leader. I remember finishing school, and I promise you, I'm not going to tell you my whole story from finishing school to now. But I do remember thinking about, what do I want to be? I knew I didn't want to go to university straight away. I was just done with school for a while and I wanted to step into the world of work. But never once did I say, let me become a manager. I was thinking about, what would I enjoy? Where could I be? How can I get out of this little village, and what would give me exposure to different worlds? And that's how I approached my career overall. But it happened pretty quickly that I realized, you can have an impact on others and a positive impact on others. So I did an apprenticeship. That's how my career started in retail. And when you are an apprentice in retail, at least in Germany, you have 2 to 3 years with intensive training, but you rotate through different parts of the business, from buying to being on the shop floor, in HR, logistics, you name it. And I spent a few months in HR, in particular in the apprentice sections, onboarding of new apprentices, giving them the best possible experience, in brackets, setting them up for success. And that was for me the moment when I thought, this is brilliant, this is fun. And this is a short moment in their career that can literally turn everything around and indeed set them up for success or failure. So long story short, I continued down that path. I stepped into different areas of human resources, recruitment included, but I was always looking after apprentices for the years to come. I really helped young people finishing school to step into the world of work, where you still need to hold this balance between they are learning, they will make some stupid mistakes as well, which I did too. And at the same time, we want them to enjoy, to have fun, and to be set up for growth. And at the age of 21, I was promoted into my first manager role. But here's the thing. I come from a traditional East German background. I highlight East Germany because there are differences to West Germany. You grew up as a kind of workaholic. You have to earn your success really hard. Make sure that you present yourself in a certain way because society is going to judge you. What does professionalism look like? How should you behave? How should you show up? Don't show too many emotions. All of this lovely stuff that builds up stories in our head. And so for me, in the early days as a manager, it was all about building this professional armor. I need to look and to sound professional. And while that was somewhat helpful, I would say it was more harming than anything else. Because there were people who didn't get through to me, who just couldn't build that relationship to me. It felt robotic almost was feedback they gave me years later. I was very principled and followed rules and processes. So computer says no was one of my favorite answers, right? But here in the policy, you say X, Y, and Z. We can't do that. And you know that the world doesn't work like that. So while ethical decision-making is important, there are shades of grey and you work with human beings, so you've got to be human. But I only came to realize all of that after I had left Germany and I relocated to the UK in 2010. So those were my mid-late 20s. And the more I worked in a multicultural background with people who were different, who had different perceptions of leadership as well, the more I was challenged. And those were eye-opening experiences, really. And the big breakthrough for me was a year when I stepped up. I was more senior in my role. I worked with certain stakeholders on big critical projects as well. I worked really hard. So it was this combination of other stakeholders, and you can't influence them with computer says no. You need to influence them by seeing them as people, understanding their needs and how to influence them. And the other part was I was working so hard that it led me, after quite a long period of time, into a burnout experience. And I had to dig deeper, understand myself better, reconnect with myself to understand when and how am I at my best. Mm-hmm. And this is the learning from the story without going into all the detail of that experience here right now. But the moment I broke through that professional armor, the moment I was able to show up as, it gives me this warm and fuzzy feeling right away, as this real me that enjoys meeting other people, that's able to listen actively, that's able to challenge back without being this professional person, just to ask curious questions, to be able to say, you know what, I don't quite agree, and here's the reason why, and to step into that debate in a playful way. When all of this happened, the magic happened. Because relationships started to feel differently. There was more fun and enjoyment in the work. We still achieved our goals, but in a very, very different way. And so therefore, nowadays, I don't focus on being impressive, on looking professional. I'm focusing on how to create space for myself and others, how to make sure people can be themselves with me, because that's how we're going to do the best work. And how can I support them to think clearly, to speak more openly and honestly, and to operate with far more intention instead of being in this constant autopilot mode that I have experienced in the past. And
wow, gosh,
that changes
so
everything.
much to unpack there. Thank you, Kathleen. It's interesting that you talk about the professional armor as related to living in East Germany. And I know listeners are going to be wondering about your accent, because it's it's an interesting hybrid, isn't it? You've got some Irish in there and as well as German accent. Anyway, I totally recognize what you're talking about. For me, I associated it with being a female in the workforce in the 1980s, in that it was a very different world. And for women, well, we just weren't supposed to be women, and definitely not mothers. And so the recipe for success, and it was very much in that point, and I'm generalizing here, but I felt, my experience was that I would have to be super professional and almost superhuman to succeed and be taken seriously. And, the emphasis in those days was very much about fix women, make them more like men, rather than fix the system, which I think is more describes where we've gone now, not universally at all. But I totally understand your point about it does take a certain amount of experience under the belt to start to relax and be open and curious and listen more effectively, doesn't it? Thank you for that. Actually, that brings me very neatly onto my next question. Leadership and what we expect from leaders, I think, has changed over the last couple of decades quite dramatically. And I'm curious about the evidence that you've seen about what people want and expect from leaders, and why leadership styles have to change and continue to change.
Oh my God, there is so much that we could talk about as a part of it, from generational changes, geopolitical changes, technology changes. All of that requires us to change. We can't just have change around us, right? And say, no, we're going to stay the same. It doesn't work like it, right? It is like you are a single partying hard for decades. Then you decide to become a parent, but your single life continues. It doesn't quite work like this. Or it can work for you, perhaps, but we all know what the implications might be for the kid, right? And it's exactly the same in leadership. So I give you an example without mentioning, obviously, the name of the organization. But over the last few years, I've been supporting leaders within a global organization. And they have gone through a vast change from what we would call traditional leadership, which means I tell you what to do, almost this like industrial age sort of leadership, top down, efficiency focused, hierarchical, status orientated, a lot of masculine energy. And we all have feminine, masculine energy inside of us, but usually masculine energy is associated with clear decision making, being direct and more present in this moment, seen and visible and strong. And we need both. We need more of both. So it is absolutely important that we start to see how the world of work has changed. We are not working anymore in the traditional way of how factories were run. Everybody's at the assembly line following a certain process. You have more complexity in this world because of all the factors I've mentioned, like tech, fast pace, AI development, for example. The workforces are spread out globally, if that's what you want, and how your business is being set up. So that requires different ways of being and behaving and leadership. And we have complexity in the world as well. And since the pandemic, a lot has just changed, obviously, as well, how we work, where we work, and so on and so forth. So in the past, leadership was often built to build stability, having this approach of creating obedience, not necessarily agility, complexity, focusing on emotional intelligence. So it is important that we move from the old-fashioned way of leading to a more human-centered way of leading. And loads of organizations manage that really, really well. And it often just requires a handful of leaders that start to live and breathe it and to really role model it for others to see, there are pockets of change. And I find this change really interesting. And now I'm going to try to be this kind of leader in my own authentic way as well. There's an interesting way of approaching the development of leadership that, what was his name? Manfred Kett de Vries, here we go, from the INSEAD Business School that he has highlighted. He speaks in his research about, in the old days, managers have predominantly been promoted into their roles because of their technical ability, their knowledge, their technical skills. And nobody has prepared them for emotional intelligence and to tune into the people they influence, they lead directly or indirectly, for example, they have an impact on. So you have leaders that step up, that become more senior and senior, that start to lose a sense of empathy, are not able to actively listen and to really tune in what's happening in the firm, in the organization. And that's what's needed. So the shift has started to happen where leaders are being promoted because of their ability to understand others, to build connections, to trust, to create a psychologically safe environment.
Mhm.
And the question is then, what are the technical skills that we still need to train them on so they have this understanding? Yeah. And then there are the transferable skills we may need, let it be an understanding of the bottom line and how to understand a budget, for example, or whatever it is. But that what we still call those soft skills. There are no soft skills. They are real hard skills because they impact the bottom line. They become far more important in that from the start. You also asked me, where's the evidence? And I think there is a ton of research that we could look into. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the one that I share regularly is Gallup research from 2023. Burnout is on the rise. They ran a huge survey, and 44% of the global employees that have been asked in their survey have been suffering from work-related stress that even led to burnout. We all know what those costs can be. You lose people, they get sick, their productivity levels go down. Yeah, and it is about not managing expectations properly, not listening to them with regards to how much they are able to manage, what they need from you as a leader, for example. Quiet quitting is on the rise, stems from Gallup as well, which is all about people not feeling seen and heard again, not listened to, and they start to disengage, to really feel tired and exhausted. And then there's this latest trend around quiet cracking, which is all about mental health. So people start to crack under the ongoing pressure. And we hear that from so many companies. And I think it's a particular challenge for small businesses. We are trying to do it all alone. We are trying to deal with the expectations, with the resource scarcity, right? Hiring freezes, not being able to get the people on board we really need. But the work or the workload isn't changing. And I'm trying to do it all on my own to prove myself, to remain strong. But I can't keep up with it
Right.
So I'm
Okay. Gosh, loads of content there. So I think most of our listeners will recognize that sort of population level shift that leaders have made over a long period, which instead of emphasizing compliance, it emphasizes more getting commitment from your team. And you also make this interesting point about, technical expertise was what was the primary qualification. We're all now in a whole new, the brave new world of artificial intelligence. And one of the things that I regularly speak to small business owners, which tends to be my population, about is that whole fear of how can I lead my people when there's, all the rules have been rewritten and I don't understand. So we have this sort of blind leading the blind scenario where people who've been used to giving frameworks and some level of certainty to their team are now not able to do that because we're all learning together, aren't we? About absolutely, I just don't think we can imagine the possibilities of artificial intelligence and how quickly it's leaping on. You also describe burnout, and I totally recognize this because I see small business owners who are torn all the time between delivering results, bringing in the fees on every month, every week, every day. And on the other hand, they want to be human-centered leaders who lead more from the heart. So in very practical terms, how can they create clarity and balance between those two things, the results and the human-centered approach, without burning out on the one hand or totally losing credibility on the other?
I love that you said on the one hand or on the other. A former manager of mine kept saying to me, Kathleen, you compartmentalize a lot. It's all in little boxes and categories. And it really stuck with me because rarely ever, in particular in leadership nowadays, can we say it's either black or white. And that adds to the complexity, right? So every time I talk about, for example, hard-led leaders, I often get the eye rolling, right? Oh, this soft approach. And we are talking about black and white. It's either profit orientation or it's hard-led. And they go hand in hand. They go absolutely hand in hand. And just imagine, as a small business owner, I'm one of them, right? And imagine you feel like you are drowning. There's so much going on from one day to another. Tons of new projects have come in or requests to fill certain vacancies in an organization. It all comes in at once. You go from this peak to trough period, right? And you feel like, okay, I'm going to get going. I get it all done. And it feels overwhelming. It feels really hard. What takes you out of those moments? What it is for me is actual human connection. So as soon as I have somebody I can call, it could be a freelancer who's supporting me from time to time in my business, right? And I can have a chat and I'm like, look, this is the situation right now. I need some help. How can we do that together? Immediately, I can literally in my body feel how the load feels lighter. And nothing has literally changed apart from having this conversation. If now there's another person who even says, how are you doing? What's really going on? Immediately, I feel better. So what's the point I'm trying to make? People who focus on human beings, who are human-centered, right, can lead to a sense of connection, to a sense of shared load, and together can actually achieve a lot and far more than you would have achieved on your own. So asking for help is so important. You give literally, as a leader, people the space to be human, to feel human. Yeah. But at the same time, and that is that scale again, you also hold a clear line on when expectations are, for example, not met. You need to have open conversations about that. And the more trusting, more open the environment is, the culture that you're building, the more easy or the easier it will feel for you to do that, to have those conversations as well. You can be and have to be transparent about business realities. So what is it you know? What is it you don't know? In this world where we don't know everything, right? Can be costs, capacity, margins. Don't sugarcoat things or try to absorb everything yourself. It's just my baggage to carry. Obviously, there's a fine line in oversharing. Yes. So this isn't about just unloading everything and saying, oh, I'm in the same position. No, but it is about acknowledging things feel uncertain at the moment. So together, let's sit down. What is it we know? What is it we don't know? How can we bring more knowledge and understanding into the mix? Right? And also saying, we don't know certain elements of it. We'll figure it out together. Yeah, that again is a part of being human. Boundary setting is really important. You can actually role model that to others. So saying no with kindness, it's something that doesn't stem from me. Dr. Brené Brown is the one who talks about that a lot. So make sure you express what boundaries are. What are our teams or groups' boundaries as well? It could be saying no to underpriced work, saying no to roles or clients that no longer fit. And have those discussions as well with team members as to whether they are freelancers or they are your direct employees. How do you make decisions? It could also be you role modeling, I am taking a break for myself today. I'm going to leave earlier because I need to build some clarity again. And we all know when we stay in the hamster wheel, that clarity is not going to come. Our brain needs space to recharge. So why not role modeling that as well? And I'm going to say it again, it isn't the one or the other. It comes together. Being clear on goals, on expectations, having honest conversations about what's working, what's not working, while offering support, openness, and transparency to others.
Wow. Yesterday, I had an in-person meeting with a networking group that I co-founded. And this exactly what you just said came up, because everyone in that meeting is a small recruitment business owner. And there were people who had made the decision that they needed to bow out on the day because of pressure of work. Those of us who still attended were in absolute agreement that actually that downward spiral is rarely going to be solved by that afternoon's work, by, nose to the grindstone work. It isn't just taking a break to go to that networking meeting. It is reviewing everything about your position. It's learning. It's the sense of support that you described earlier. And you made me think there also about, again, finding the balance between clarity about goals and listening and honesty and being open to other approaches. I had a good example about a year ago where a business owner, this is a medium-sized business owner told me with some incredulity about one of his middle managers who basically had a problem with attendance, late and persistent lateness from a probationer. And it turned out that this middle manager had spoken to the probationer, who said, well, the reason is they've taken a carriage off my train and I can't get on it. And this middle manager, who was all for being human-centered and helpful and supportive and being a listening leader, had actually taken responsibility away from that individual and was now engaged in a lengthy correspondence with the train company about, adding extra carriages or more services, and had absolved the new member of staff from that responsibility.
Yeah.
And I do observe that people are just trying to be everything. They've heard they should be a listening leader and, leaders eat last and so forth.
Oh.
And on the other hand, they've got people saying, give us clarity. And I think that tension is very, very real.
Yeah.
Particularly for I don't know, but I observe it very strongly with small business owners. So I've just given you an example there of a misconception about human-centered leadership. From your perspective, though, Kathleen, what are a few of the common misconceptions about human-centered leadership in business?
First of all, I kind of love that example that you have just shared, because we want to overprotect, right? We want to step in. And you mentioned that tension. I got to do it all. It is all about balance, about nuances. And it starts with you again. So similar to my experience early on, how I came into leadership, my learnings from leadership. This wasn't about, now I can be everything to everyone. My learning was the moment I focus on myself, the moment I can be cool with myself, to be quite blunt. The moment I'm connected to myself, I know myself well, my boundaries, and I'm able to express them. That's the moment where the magic happens. So I actually don't agree with Simon Sinek on Leaders Eat Last. My business partner, who's a massive fan of him, would highly disagree. We have huge discussions around it. But I think you need to eat first. You really need to look after yourself, put that oxygen mask on, and make sure you are okay, because that's the only way to be in service of others. And in service doesn't mean I do everything for you. In service means I make sure together with you, dear team, that we get the best out of you and the best out of that teamwork. And that puts the ball into their court as well. And that's an experience I've had last week. I worked with a group of leaders for a few days, face to face, and their leaders, C-suite level, were there for the first day, and then the second day is just that leadership team. And it was fascinating. So every experiential project we ran was about blame. We didn't have the information from our leaders. They did not provide clarity, and the list goes on. And we ran a few reflection exercises with them to say, let's put you into the role of your C-suite leaders. Let's put you in the role of your teams. So we literally changed positions. And the aha moments were huge. The aha moments were, oh my God, I never consider how these other folks might feel, what's going on for them. Because I'm in my me-centered way of being, operating in this way of being without consideration. And they actually noticed how lonely it might feel to be that leader of that team, the challenges and tensions they experience. And so therefore, what I'm trying to say is the team needs to be held accountable as well for making decisions, for taking ownership, for improving their own performance, for holding their team members accountable. And that's why those honest conversations need to happen. And yet, human-centered leadership is often being perceived as this soft thing. This thing about being nice, about having it all and giving it all and bringing clarity. And no, it is not, because leadership of today is about making sure that we utilize the diversity of the people we work with. And together we move in the direction of our results, of the goals we are trying to achieve. And we do that differently by co-creating clarity, for example. It doesn't just come from one person. And we are back again in the traditional way of being. We see each other as human beings. So here's again the emotional intelligence that plays a huge role. We operate from a perspective of cultivating trust while offering autonomy and meaning in the workplace, because that's something that matters to people. Do I actually see a purpose in the work I do? And again, you can't figure it out as one leader. It requires conversations between at least two parties. So human-centered leadership is more focused on individuality and understanding there is no one size fits all. I work with different people and they need different approaches from me. I need something different from them because they are different. So it's not about cuddling. It's not about harmony. It's not about endless consensus. It's about healthy conflict, open debates, agreeing to disagree, and seeing the individual in front of me.
And listeners who are recognizing some of the situations that we're discussing here and possibly even seeing issues that they have, definitely hang on to the end of this program, because Cathleen has an exceptionally generous offer for the first listeners to call her. Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. Can I just try and focus on practicalities, because I'm sure we all agree that honest conversations and clear boundaries and listening are all good things. It's the practical application of that that gives business leaders real challenges, because there they are, particularly in small businesses. They don't have a load of reserves to fall back on. They are focused on this sort of hand-to-mouth profitability issue on a daily basis. That is really upfront in their face. And at the same time, they want to be a great leader and develop a healthy culture and so forth. But a lot of small business owners say to me, rolling their eyes, they're often describing, for example, Gen Z behavior and snowflakes and so forth, which is a stereotype. But what they're saying is, I cannot get them to take responsibility. They just want me to, they want to turn around and say, it's not my fault. Then they don't seem to care when there's failure, or when we've run at a loss that month, which is a very real thing. So can you give us some practical pointers about how we get this shared accountability rather than I'm the boss and I'm the one pushing you all uphill, and a lack of ownership of that to some team members?
So first of all, what was for me a real eye-opener was once I changed my own perspective. So when I would have thoughts like, they don't seem to get it, and those Gen Zers are mainly interested in their work-life balance, right? I shifted that to observing, what do I learn from them? So, and that might create some eye rolling now again. But for example, in my day-to-day work, I feel that pain quite often. You are hiring, you are selling, you are delivering, you are managing emotions, you are paying the bills, you're doing your accounts, which I really despise doing. You do it all. right? And when you work with somebody, you hire people, what you want is real support, real accountability. And yet I learn a ton from them. And it is brilliant when I do, because they also remind me of, let's switch off. Let's have a bit of joy and laughter in between. When we have talks about how are you doing, what did you do yesterday, it helps me in this moment to disconnect for a minute at least as well. So first of all, shift your mindset around, see what can I learn from them? What do they offer me? Now, that didn't answer your question with regards to collective accountability. So first of all, and that is a bit of time intensive in the beginning, figure out what motivates them. Why do they do that job? Is it about because they love hiring people so much and they love to achieve their quotas? Is it about they being interested about a certain industry you operate in and they want to learn more about that? Is it something else? Really figure that out, because the moment you understand what motivates them, what drives them, you can play into that. So any ask you have can literally be packed up in, and this is how it offers you some insight, some learning into that field. And immediately that shifts motivation. Don't forget to have honest and open conversations. We all have job descriptions where there are certain tasks we love to do and certain tasks we definitely don't love to do, but they are part of the package. So having that honest and open conversation is important and will remain important. But speak to them in an adult-to-adult way. It's not parent-child. We are grown-ups, right? So have this human conversation. If you have multiple team members and you're lucky enough to do that and to have those resources, quote unquote, make sure you have collective goals. So one thing that was a game changer for me as an employee and manager at the same time was to work on collective goals with my colleagues. And often I would be thrown into certain projects where I didn't believe I was the key expert. But man, did I have a lot of learning, and it was fun to experience the other colleagues as well in that space. And don't just offer those goals. Also sit down with people, let it be once a quarter, whatever your time frame is, where you say, okay, and where are we with that? And what have you learned? And what's the feedback you want to give to one another? And I think that's a key. The more often you offer multiple team members collective feedback that they start to share with one another, the less reliant they start to be on you, because they start to hold each other accountable. It requires time investment in the beginning to actually demonstrate what does good feedback giving and receiving look like and feel like. How do we have productive meetings, right? How do we set goals that stick? Once that's established, you'll get a return on your investment. And that is the key, because they start to run themselves. And then check in. How is it working? What's working well? What's not working well? You may need some further conversations. And in some instances, you may figure out together with a team member, maybe we're not made for one another, right? That can happen too. But keep going and use that collective, resourcefulness that you have present. The last piece I would mention is around culture. Right? It requires a bit of a culture change. And culture is often being perceived as this big thing we need to establish. Culture is basically made of the behaviors we demonstrate every single day. And in particular, as a busy small business owner, what is not needed is for you to have now a big initiative in rolling out a culture and getting everybody on board. Culture is being established by the behaviors that you communicate, that you want to see more of in your business, and the behaviors you role model. That's the key. So instead of focusing on this big abstract thing, focus on important micro behaviors that you live and breathe every single day and that you hold other people accountable to as well. So they need to know what the behaviors are that are acceptable and non-acceptable in your business, and where they play a role in any interaction with your clients, for example, with your colleagues, whoever it is, investors, whatnot, and how do they show up.
This is such an important point. Culture is not something that you can separately build from what you do, is it? And I sometimes when I'm working with clients of mine, we move towards defining values. It's interesting how many businesses, small businesses, I find they think it would be nice to have values on their website. And so the business owner in isolation has identified 5 abstract nouns, preferably all beginning with the same letter. Yeah. So you get random lists like professional, personal, performance. Okay. Those are real examples, actually. And of course, these abstract nouns don't give any clue as to, well, how does that work through in behavior? Do they? Quite apart from being unilaterally imposed and therefore meaningless to most people. I've done a number of sessions with whole teams involving very detailed questionnaires as well, that we break it down into, well, if we are professional, if I walked into your office now, what would I see people doing that you are describing under this sort of umbrella term, professional? And the values that I produce with them in collaboration are always phrased in a verb clause, as in a doing description, what we do, and, are sometimes with some more detailed notes. And those are much, much more useful for getting a mutually understood culture, because it actually leads to processes as well. Sometimes. Okay. Now, before we run out of time, I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. Here we are. We've talked a lot about rising complexity in the workplace. Could you very briefly, if I'm going to force your hand here to say one practical step that small business leaders can take to cut through all the noise and lead with impact, what would it be?
Get back to why you exist. Why did you originally start that business? Get back to your core. And are you living to the core of that business, that original purpose? Or have you been distracted by so many other things because other people are doing it that you don't stand out anymore, for example, and you stretch yourself too thin? So that would be one of the key elements.
Right. So, and I want to be clear here, because this is something I wrote about in my book. I find that that's interpreted in a way that's not useful by some people. So they think that the why is to do with a bigger social purpose or has to be some sort of global statement. I actually prefer to take them back and say, well, hang on a minute. Why did the world need you to start a business? In other words, what do you do better than the average that dictates that there's a gap in the market, if you like, and who do you do it for? Rather than, because we want to create social impact or fair access to education or some charitable endeavor. Yeah. Those things are all important and great, but do we mean the same thing, Kathleen, when we say
totally
why you do it?
100%. And I give you a very brief example. When I worked in recruitment, a manager of mine said, you know what, Kathleen, I want any candidate that we have interviewed have the best experience ever. Even if we give a no, they still speak so well about us. That stuck with me. And if I were a recruitment business owner, which I'm not, that would still be one of the big purposes. People feel really seen and heard, and they will still talk about the experience they have had with us, right? And left with more confidence. That is for me one of those small steps. It is definitely not about you have a huge social impact unless that is indeed your purpose and that you are working towards. But it can be something small and meaningful. And what you said is really important. What makes you you? What do you bring to this world that's unique, that stands out?
Yeah.
And to that example, you will not be able to offer this great experience if you go in all directions, you stretch yourself too thin and you are overwhelmed by the complexity.
That's a really, really useful takeaway, in my view. I think that I do observe a lot of people who think that recruitment is about filling jobs. And so for example, if a candidate is not suitable for a job, they're just rejected, forgotten about, not communicated with until something else comes along. It's a very transactional approach. And while it's not going to pay back in every market, one of the reasons that when I was actually recruiting, that I was successful was because I did keep relationships with some of the really good people. And as their career advanced, they went from candidates to clients and always referrals and repeat business. Yeah. Okay. I'm so sorry we've run out of time, Kathleen, because I feel you've got some fascinating insights, and I'm sure our listeners will too. Now, Kathleen, you have a very generous offer. Could you describe that and tell people how to get in touch with you?
And I'm really looking forward to sharing my offer. So here is the whooping offer. I'm going to give to the first 10 people who reach out to me 1 hour for free of impact mentoring and coaching, which means we're going to look at your key leadership challenges that you are facing and identify a quick win, maybe even a few wins to help you overcome this challenge. Well, here is your invitation. Don't just reach out to me, but share your challenge with me in your email. So that helps you to start to think about it more closely. And how can you reach out? Simply send a message to zmc@CathleenMerkelCoaching.com. I'm pretty sure, Alison, you're going to publish that email address
yes.
as well. And
it will come out in the program notes. That's a phenomenal offer. And I'm sure that many people will want to take you up on that, but don't hang about because it has to be a maximum of 10 people. So Cathleen O'Sullivan, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I am quite sure that you've got much, much more value that you're going to be able to add to some of our lucky listeners. And thank you so much for joining me today. So I'll leave you here. Listeners, thank you for spending this time with us again. Please subscribe if you haven't done already and listen again. I'm Alison Humphries. My business is Recruitment Leadership. And if you want recruitment industry-centered advice and executive coaching, contact me, which is alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk. Kathleen, thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk, referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.